All right, so good morning, guys. How are we doing?
Good, how are you?
I am good. I was just considering the calendar, and yikes, I mean, so we meet today, and we're going to look at some of the issues that we had, which weren't many, by the way, very good, on the rough draft for Essay 1, the illustration essay. You all, when I say you all, I'm addressing my online audience as well, you all pretty much knocked it out of the park. It was a very nice job. Okay. There was very little for me to say. Okay. Very minor stuff, things that I expected, such as formatting issues. Perfect. Topic-wise, you had it perfect. Okay. There were one or two issues where a couple of people actually used sources, which, while admirable, is a no-no for this essay, right? This all has to be from your experience. So if you did use sources, just take them out. Okay. Did anybody have any specific questions before we get into this in general? Okay, so we're going to do that, and then we're going to get into compare and contrast. Okay. Again, as I said before the camera started rolling, this is very independent even for you guys because, yikes, I mean, we don't meet but 4 times, right? And we're halfway done after today. Okay. So next week is the library session, and if you click on that, you'll see kind of instructions about it. And that is, you're going to meet in building 700, morning, and you're going to be going to the banquet hall, which, if you go into building 700, it's the huge building on the opposite side of campus. Okay. You walk in the doors and you go straight back. That's the banquet hall, straight back. Okay. That's where the temporary library is. So you're going to go there next week. If you can help it, don't miss it. Okay. For my online students, you have a virtual session next week as well. The hybrid guys, you guys have the face-to-face one. Okay. So it's very important that you attend this session, whichever way you're supposed to, because it's going to get into MLA and it's going to get into secondary sources. And from now on out, after tonight, of course, which your guys' final essay is due for the illustration, you're immediately moving to the compare and contrast stuff, starting next week when your draft is due. Okay, and that will require sources. Okay, so there are lots of places you can look for help with sources. You can go to the link that we have posted in the announcements and also in the lesson folder for Purdue OWL, their online writing lab. If you Google Purdue OWL, O-W-L, you'll see it come up. It's the first hit. That's the source that we all use when we have questions about MLA. Your book also has MLA business in it too. Okay? You can refer to that. You can go into our lesson folder and look at the compare and contrast stuff, and you will see examples of it there as well. And as usual, at the bottom of the lessons folder is a short video on how to put together the paper. I don't know how many of you saw it or not, but everybody did a pretty nice job. It's little nitty-gritty things. Okay. And moving into sources, not that much different than what you did. The only difference is you're not going to be using your own experience to support what you're saying. You're going to be using someone else's. Okay. So from here on out, we're getting into other people's expertise. We don't have the expertise we need for the information that we're going to be using. We need to borrow. We need to borrow from other people. That is where the source stuff is all about. So if I'm going to talk to you about something that I'm not really qualified, for example, to talk to you about, like I don't know quantum physics, okay? You have really no reason to believe a word I say because that's not my field. I am an English professor. So if I speak about English, writing, reading, and all that, yes, I'm an expert. Outside of that, not so much so. So in order for me to have credibility, I've got to borrow the credibility from someone else. So if I talk to you about quantum physics and I say blah, 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 this is what I say, blah, 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 and you're like, yeah, okay, what do you know? You have absolutely every right to ask that. I expect you to as a student. You're pursuing knowledge, so you need to aggressively pursue knowledge, including questioning things. and I say, well, those are just my thoughts, okay? And you can regard it just like my thoughts. Those are my thoughts. You have your own thoughts too. That doesn't mean mine are any more credible than yours. Okay? But if I say to you, oh, well, I'm getting these ideas from, Dr. Lilith from Quantum Physics 101, blah, blah, blah. Now it's a little different because I've invoked somebody who is an expert. Right? I'm using their ideas, their thoughts, to back up what I'm communicating to you. That's a secondary source. That's all it is. I know sometimes there's a lot of mystery, shrouding and anxiety, shrouding the idea of secondary sources, but they are no more or less than you borrowing expertise or experience from someone else and using it. So when we do the compare and contrast essay, you're going to be picking two things to compare. Right? And you're going to see in my model that I use the Galaxy and the iPhone, the two flagship phones from Samsung and Apple. Years ago, you'll see it's kind of funny, but it still works. Right? And other than being a user, right, and I can tell you things from a user's perspective, so I'm an expert user, okay, but I can't really get into the tech side. Like, I can tell you that one has more RAM than the other, but I can't really tell you why or how that helps. Well, that's Apple can, Samsung can. So I'm probably going to go to either Apple or Samsung, whichever one I'm talking about at the moment, quote somebody who knows what they're talking about. I'm borrowing their expertise so that when you read my report on it, okay, you can say, oh, that's not just him as a user saying it. He's using the expertise from Apple. So that's kind of lends it more credence, if you will. And you'll see as we move forward into the third essay cycle, the argument cycle, you'll see that we start talking about pathos, logos, and ethos. Right? Logos being reasoning, evidence and reasoning. Pathos being emotions, and ethos being ethical credibility. This is the credibility stuff, right? When we're doing anything and we need to borrow credibility, we use secondary sources. Okay? But I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's what we're rolling through today in detail. That was just kind of a skim over of it, okay? And of course, a reminder for you guys here in the hybrid section, your final essays due tonight, right? So make sure you go over rough draft. If you don't know what I'm talking about, all right? If you come into, oh, by the way, while we're still on the calendar, you see the library session next week on the 13th. And then the following week is Juneteenth, which is a holiday, so we're not meeting there either. So you're going to be doing the compare and contrast essay pretty much on your own. I will probably post a video like I did last week, even though it was a holiday, because you really can't afford to get behind per se. You won't get behind. We're going to talk about compare and contrast today. You're going to do the draft. You're going to go to the library session, and they're going to talk about sources and citing. And you're going to look at our examples, and you're going to be okay. Okay. And remember, we build points-wise, so that the second essay is worth more than the first. And the third essay is the big one. Okay. So that if you lose points here and there between now and then, it's not critical, but you're building for the third essay, where you will know this stuff, and it will be worth the points. Okay. So don't panic if you didn't, knock it out of the park for the first essay, although most of you did. Take your time, go through it, make the corrections. Okay. The key to these things, guys, and I said this on day one, the key to these things, attention to detail. Okay. Pay attention to detail. Why? Because I am. Well, so were you. I'm the guy paying you. You agree, right? Like your boss in the real work, only I'm not paying you money, I'm paying you grade. Okay. So, you need to pay attention because I'm going to be paying attention, especially the things that I specifically point out. Okay? And that leads me to what I was about to get into, right? If you look in our essay folder, essay 1 illustration, you go down to the bottom, right? One Once again, if you go into the rough draft Dropbox, now you'll see your assignment with a grade attached to it. And when you click on it, up will pop your essay with comments, okay? And it's these comments in blue, trying not to keep it on too long because I don't want that person to be embarrassed, but either way. So what you're going to do is, as I said in the class announcement, guys, for this particular draft grade, all right? I don't know if you saw this yet or not. The final version of your essay will be based on how well you edit your draft, okay? That's why when you get into the specifications, it says, when it talks about what the rough draft is, it says specifically that it's a dress rehearsal for the final essay, which means that it needed to be as close to the final essay as you could possibly get, okay? But that doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes. That's what the drafts are for, okay? The draft is, as you saw, is worth 25 points, assignment points. And those assignment points aren't as heavy as the final essay points, because this is where you need to make mistakes and learn how to fix it, okay? This is why it's so important that you carefully edit your draft and submit it as your final essay, because the final essay is the one that's worth essay points. And as you remember from the first session, we have 3 essays we're required to do, and each one of those is the final essay is with a graduated scale. Okay. The assignments are combined things, so all of your assignments, as we said, you'll do a pool, and they're worth 20 or 25%, I forgot what it was this time, of your grade. Okay. So while, you know, every point is great and it's sacred and all that stuff, don't necessarily cry over the assignment points. Okay. The points between this week and next week, between last week and this week's assignment, yes, cry over the final essay. That's the one to cry over, because that's the one that counts the heaviest. And then next week we have a draft. Don't cry over it. The following is the final for cycle 2, and then draft, and then final. So the draft gives you an opportunity to make mistakes without having them cost you too much. Okay? So make sure that you're aware of this. Okay, so when I grade your drafts, I generally only mark up the first part of your essay. Sometimes it's a paragraph, sometimes it's 1 page, sometimes it's 2 paragraphs. But you can see where I stop, because all of a sudden the blue comments stop. Okay. Why do I do that? Well, I'm pointing out trends to you. Okay. And that's going to mostly be your problem at this trends. In other words, unless you're used to writing in formal invention like MLA or APA or whatever, you're not used to the rules, so to speak. So, for example, in everyday English, me talking to you or you talking to me, or an email, or whatever. Okay, we have a certain set of rules that we go by, but in formal English, we have different sets of rules. Okay? For example, we don't use contractions. Almost everybody found that out. Because we're so used to it, right? We speak in contractions because it's the proper, it's the proper way to speak. We don't say, I cannot do that. Very still do that. We say, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. We don't say, I do not want to do that. It sounds funny because although it's proper, it generally is only really proper in formal language. Okay? This happens to be formal language, the essence. Okay? So for speaking, for email, for all that stuff, things like contractions are fine. We use them every day. But when you're going through your draft, make sure you didn't use any. I pointed out a few like in the beginning or whatever, and if you see them, okay, don't think, oh, I only have these couple. Go through your essay for the rest of them. All right? Because when I grade your final essay, I have your draft on one side, your final essay on the other monitor, and I'm looking between them. Did you fix that? Yes. Did you fix that? No. Okay. Did you fix it? That's where your score comes from. So if you fix everything and you're good, you'll gain points back. So for example, let's say you got a 21 on your draft. That's pretty good, that's an 84. Solid B, right? If you do all of the corrections and everything is fixed well, okay, you probably get anywhere from an 86 to an 88, maybe even a 90, depending on how many issues you fixed, okay, on your final essay. So you automatically will boost your score. Whatever score you got on the draft, guys, is 1/4 of the potential for the final essay, right? Because it's only 25 points, so times 4 is 100. So if you got a 22, that's an 88%. Again, good score. Okay. 23, excellent, 92. Okay. Even at 23, right, that means you made a couple of mistakes, so you really got a grade. So, go through and fix them. That'll turn that 92 into a 95. Right? And while an A is an A is an A, it counts when you're adding them together and trying to get an average. So the higher your grades, obviously, the higher your average. Right? So you want to get the extra points if you can. What happens sometimes is people who get into the 90s and 23s and 24s will tend to ignore it and just submit it and take a look at it because they think, oh, I got a 92, that's cool. Moving forward, after the first essay, you'll lose points for that. For this one, you won't. In other words, if you don't fix the things that I ask you to fix, you won't lose points. You'll get a snarky remark from me, but I won't subtract points this time because you're getting used to it. But for the next 2 essays, you will lose points for not fixing mistakes. Okay? That also means that, for some of the mistakes, you're going to have to look and see what it says. If you click on the correction, an explanation will pop up. Or if you hover over with the cursor, an explanation will pop up. Okay? So if you see a comment, you're not quite sure what it means, hover over it, it will expand and show you. Okay? So CONT will expand and say contraction. We do not use contraction, forward right. NUL, that's another one. We don't use numbers in formal writing. Only 3 digits or higher can you use numbers. So 99 and below, you have to write the word out. 99, N-I-N-U-T-Y, actually 90. I know, it's silly, but it's formal writing. 100, you can write 100. Okay. So there were a couple of those as well, right? Where you used a number and I used the comment, and you just change it to the number, that's all. So if you wrote the number 7, get to write it down as CBD. That was another one. Double space, almost everybody got the DS comment, okay? Sometimes it's hard to see the double spacing. I mean, I see it because I've been doing it for a long time, it's like pops out to me. But sometimes it's hard to see. Okay? So obviously this is single space, okay? This is double space, right? Single space, double space. So if I were fixing this, I would do a Control A, which selects everything. And I would go into the Paragraph tab, pull it down, and then there's 2 pieces in there that you have to check. I'm going to show you this. I'm just going to go to one. Here's your comments, and when you put the cursor on it and click it, you see this definition pop up. Okay. Double space throughout. Globally select all. Control A, that's what I was just saying, right? Check the Paragraph tab to make sure that your line spacing is set to double, and both your spacing values before and after are set to 0. And that's the issue that people usually have at settings. Okay. What do I mean? I'll show you. Let's do this. Let's go to the, or no, let's go to the one. Come in here. So I wanted to fix this. This happens to be perfect double space. And you can see, forget about the highlight. You can see here, right, that everything is very uniform spaced, right? This is the double space, right? It's double spaced between here. This is all double space, this is double space, okay? The easiest way to do this, guys, is to go Control A, up in the paragraph tab here, open it up, and then you have this right here. This is what that comment was talking about, okay? This has to say double, and both of these have to say 0. Most people's words default, and I think the before or the after have like 6 or something, or 8. And that's why the spacing is off. So what you have to do, just to make sure, and it literally takes 10 seconds, guys. When you finish your draft right before you upload it, okay, do the Control A, go into paragraph, and then just set this to 0, 0, double. And then click OK, and it'll be good. All right? So that's the double space issue that was very common. Okay? And again, the blue comments on your draft are mine. They are the ones you need to pay attention to. The purple ones are the systems. And you don't really have to correct those things per se. Those are more like flags for you to check and make sure you didn't make a mistake. Okay? But I'm looking at the blue marks, the blue issues. All right?
So you can change the red ones if you want.
One more time.
You can change the red ones, the purple ones, so you can change it also?
You can.
No.
Yeah, it does. You know, if you see a lot of purple comments, there's an issue somewhere. But the thing with the purple comments is, it's almost like grammar check in Microsoft Word. Word has grammar check too. It doesn't just have a spell check. And if you know from spell check, it's not always right. Spell check will mess up like titles and words and things. It doesn't know like names. It'll mess up names, spelling of names. Normal words, it's good. Okay? But grammar check, almost out of the box, grammar check almost never works. And then the reason is because it's so accurate that it needs to be customized. You do that in the menus and the tools. You have to tell Word the style of writing you're doing. You know, there's like 15 other things you have to go in and set in order for grammar check to be accurate. And the same thing for those purple comments. Okay. They're not necessarily accurate because they haven't been set. They're automatically on because of the system. Okay. Again, you can look at those purple comments for potential issues, but the ones I'm doubly going to be looking at are the blue ones, the ones I hate. Okay. So just be aware of that. Other common comments you might see are RET, redundant, which means that whatever I highlighted and set redundant to, you kind of already said what